which is a feature in this Zoom platform. And then you will have the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes, first stating your name and address, but we'll get to that. But that's just kind of where we are. Today is June 11th and it is 5 o'clock and we are calling the meeting to order. So the first thing on the agenda is a moment of silence. I think we can all agree that given our world today, a moment of silence just to reflect for a moment can be very handy at the beginning of these meetings. So that's what we'll do right now. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. The next thing on their agenda is a roll call. Ms. Green, are you doing the roll or is Ms. Thacker doing the roll? And everybody's muted. Just
Yes, I'm doing the roll call.
okay.
Mr. Bryant,
Present.
Ms. Bryson Morsberger,
Present.
Dr. Kraft,
Present.
Ms. McKeever,
Here.
Ms. Puryear,
Here.
Ms. Torres,
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Wade,
Here.
Is that everybody, Ms. Green? Okay. So the first thing on the list on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion around the agenda? Go ahead and call the vote then. Ms. Green? All those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, we have to do a roll call. So Julia is going to now call our names.
Mr. Bryant,
Aye.
Ms. Bryson Morsberger,
Aye.
Dr. Kraft,
Yes.
Ms. McKeever,
Yes.
Ms. Puryear,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Wade.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you all. The next item on the agenda is comments from members of the community. And as I stated earlier, which you may not have been part of if you're just now joining us, in order to participate in the public comment, we're asking the public to raise their hand in this Zoom platform, and then Mr. Faust will let me know who's up, and they will have then the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. We ask that everybody state your name and address, and I feel like there's something else, but 3 minutes is what I'm going to try to keep track of the time, but I always lose track. So please be respectful of the time. That's all. And then at the end, if we have, I don't know, if people can't raise their hand for some reason, then we'll start to address any chat questions, but please frame it in the form of a question, or I'm sorry, in the form of a comment. And anyway, actually, I'm not sure how that chat feature is going to work, but let's do the raise hand first.
We have several who have raised their hand already, Ms. McKeever.
Okay, so so people can figure it out. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Is there anything I'm forgetting? Ms. Green, Ms. Thacker, Mr. Faust? Fantastic.
I think you're good.
Okay. So Mr. Faust, who do we have?
First, we have Elizabeth Ike, and I'm
Thank you
going
so
to
much.
activate her microphone now.
Okay.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Beth Ike. I reside at 802 St. Clair Avenue, and I'm here to speak as a mom of 2 elementary students. While some actions in our school division have troubled me and kind of caused me to scratch my head in the past, nothing has been more worrying than what was on display in the last open school board meeting, when the administration at best mistakenly stated and at worst was purposefully misleading about the city council's budget process. There was no need to force a vote on such sweeping change without providing a chance for the public to weigh in. I've been following our budget conversations and was very surprised to receive no notice of proposed changes, nor a request for feedback. In addition, when one lone board member spoke up to ask for a pause in the process to allow for the community to consider the change being made, she was ignored. Is the school board also aware of the city council's deadlines? I would have expected so. I was truly appalled to see the board, but honestly, especially our chair, be so disrespectful to Ms. Morsberger and to move on so quickly from her request for a basic pause. There was no need for the timing that was pushed. This all took place with the tragic backdrop provided by a global pandemic, and I know that affects everything and that we are all doing the best we can. That said, when policies are created in a vacuum, problems are inevitable. We seem to have knee-jerk decisions being made while projects that have long been determined to be necessary, like moving 5th grade back to elementary, for one, seem to languish. What I'd like to ask this board and this division for tonight is better transparency. I'd like to see you folks be better connected to the families you serve. I know we can do better. Please do better. Our kids depend upon you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ike. Who is next? Mr. Faust?
We have Laura Brown.
Hi, Ms. Brown, welcome.
Good evening. This is Laura Brown, and I reside at 405 Fairway Avenue, and my child attends Burnley Moran Elementary. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I wanted to let you know that as a city schools parent whose daughter has greatly benefited from the support of the school resource officers, I am disappointed to learn that the MOU has been canceled with the police. My daughter is a student at Burnley Moran, and on several occasions, the school resource officers were enlisted to ensure her safety. They arrived within a matter of minutes and worked with school administration to safely locate and return her to the building. At that time, we were in the process of identifying my daughter's needs and developing a treatment plan. As Dr. Atkins knows, this was a very difficult time when all resources were needed in a all hands on deck approach, and the school resource officers took the extra time to establish rapport and mentorship with my daughter. Officer Pendleton came to school and had lunch with her on several occasions. The other officer, Shiflett, reached out to me as a parent to offer support. And I want to point out, speaking frankly, that my daughter is mixed race and has special needs in the areas of social emotional learning. And the SROs in the school were nothing but positive with her and provided her with much needed security and reassurance at a time when it was greatly needed. I fear that national concerns, while extremely valid, may have painted an inaccurate picture of our local Charlottesville school resource officers. I understand there's good cause to evaluate the role of police within our school and larger community, and I recognize the incredibly important need to bolster social emotional supports for all of our students, my daughter included. My hope moving forward is that a model is developed that incorporates police staff into community building efforts within our schools, as well as active supports and safety measures for our students. I believe if we remove officers altogether from our school interactions, we only widen the structural divide between our children and our community and the police. And I also do believe that our schools are safer with school resource officers in the building, because I know our local SROs would respond swiftly and bravely in any safety crisis. And I'm going to leave you with a quote from my daughter when I let her know that the SROs may not be there in the building anymore. She said, but they're nice, and Officer Pendleton helped me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank
and your comments. Who do we have next, Mr. Faust?
I have Christa Bennett, and I am turning on her microphone now.
Hi, Ms. Bennett. Thank you for joining us. 3 minutes, please.
Ms. Bennett, I think you may have accidentally muted your microphone.
Oh, yes. Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go. Perfect.
I'm Christa Bennett. I live at 106 Chust Court, and I am the parent of a rising second grader and seventh grader. And I was glad to see the announcement today that CCS is removing school resource officers from our schools. I want to thank you for making that choice. I am glad for 2 reasons. The first is that the removal of SROs is an evidence-based decision. There's no evidence that they prevent more violence than they cause, and in some cases are contributing to a school-to-prison pipeline. And the second is that our money is better spent elsewhere. A few weeks ago, I was told by my 12-year-old's math teacher that while she qualified to take algebra next year and she wants to take algebra at Buford, she might not be able to because there aren't enough algebra teachers. This is problematic for all of our students, of course, but it is also part of systemic racism and its impact. Under-resourced students who have potential to excel in more advanced math will be held back because there aren't enough advanced math teachers in school, and they don't have the resources to access math opportunities outside of school. The racial component is that Black and Brown students are disproportionately represented in lower income populations, not because experiencing low income is inherent in being Black or Brown, but because our policies have created income inequalities along racial lines. And the good news is that our policies can also help fix those income inequalities. So I know that the school board cares about equity, and I thank you for that. I do have one question, and that is, how can we track where the $300,000 that would have been spent on SROs will be spent instead? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Who do we have next, Mr. Faust?
Miss Dede Smith.
Hi, Ms. Smith. Welcome. 3 minutes. Ms. Smith, I can't hear you.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Thank you, Dede Smith. I live on Jefferson Park Circle in the Jackson Via District. Thank you for listening. I know we are all quite wrought over recent events, and I struggled with what to say, but I would like to actually read something from an African-American leader in a community that's at least economically comparable to ours, Burlington, Vermont. And I'm going to excerpt this. It's Kyle Dodson. In a nation with 44% non-white students and extreme inequality in educational attainment, it's time we address these issues as seriously as we did during the civil rights era. It is time that we finally live up to our beliefs about ourselves. Yes, we are progressive. Yes, we have one of the highest per capita rates of nonprofit service organizations in any community in America. But we are no different fundamentally from our peers across this nation. We are all the heirs of a depraved, cruel, even barbaric history of one group of humans systematically abusing, debasing, dehumanizing, and depriving another group of humans. We need to own the horror of the past. We need, and this was my favorite line, and it's a little out of place here, but we need a new civil rights agenda for our schools. That's the end of the quote. I'm quite sure you, like me, are following the dire predictions about what's being called the COVID slide, a rather gentle way of what Jeffrey Canada described, more explicitly described as an educational emergency. Looking at the bright side, herein lies an enormous opportunity. We all know the fall will look nothing like we have had in the past, especially in the enrichment sector. Looking at your website, it says that Charlottesville City Schools have 1,000 adults for our 4,000 city children. At least half of those, according to your website, are technically teachers, many of whom will not be able to do what they are accustomed to doing. Retrain them to provide one-on-one tutoring for the children who are behind. Some were before, some are new. An opportunity we have never had to follow best practices, 60 to 90 minutes a day, one-on-one, 3 times a week for 3 to 6 months. I assume you will assess the damage done as soon as possible. Please do so in both reading and math. There are professionals out there that say that for as big a slide as we'll see in reading, math will be much worse. We may never have another opportunity like this to start anew and learn how to bring all our students up to grade level. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Faust, who's next?
We have Elizabeth Stark.
Hi, Ms. Stark. Thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, this is Elizabeth Stark. I live at 408 Fairway Avenue, and I'm a mom to a Beaufort student and a Burnley Moran student. I've written to the school board on this issue, and I want to thank you for your swift action in removing SROs today. We know that SROs do not make students safer. And as communities across the country grapple with the ways we replace policing both in schools and our communities, I ask that you really focus on using the funding that went toward policing in schools and create a more supportive school environment. We need counselors and people who are trained to help our children. I was very alarmed to learn that a counselor at Walker had been cut, and the staff there seems drastically reduced even from when my daughter went there just a couple years ago. These students need counseling more than ever, especially in light of the COVID crisis. In the past year, CCS has taken bold steps to increase equity. Removing SROs is another step in that process, but it will only be successful if we use this chance to reinvest in our kids, hire school counselors, and create, positive, safe learning environments for kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Mr. Faust, what do we got next?
We have Steph Gist.
Is this Ms. Gist? Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Steph Gist. I live at 307 5th Street Southwest. I am speaking about 2 things. The first one I signed up for on May 18th. So also to give context for this, for what I'm going to talk about, you need to know that I am Caucasian. I am a white person. So when I first contacted the school board on the 18th was after I was really stunned at what happened from our president using coronavirus, changing it to be purposefully the Chinese virus. My child goes to CHS and is Asian, and to hear that, and I've also been tracking, and incidences of violence against Asians is going up, and it still is going up. What stunned me was that this is still going on, is that so our president was told he cannot do that. And so he is not, but still there are news media that is purposefully using the phrase Chinese virus. There are also people in policy that are currently still using Chinese virus. And since this is actively being done, I think we need to take a stand. And I call upon the school board to, when we go into school, educate teachers that that is not ever an appropriate term. Not mean, but correct them. It is not. It is a virus. That what this is doing, and where I segue into my second point was how horrified I was to think that a person in power, knowing that this is causing racism, causing people to be hurt for their race, that it was still going on, that it is still being done by our news. And our children are still hearing it now, which is why I think the school board needs to be proactive in educating staff. So that was on the 18th. And then what happened since then was, of course, watching a man be murdered by a uniformed police officer. And to watch a man be murdered by a uniformed police officer really brought to mind, really made me see my privilege, because I realized it was being white that made me feel surprised that a person in power would do something like the president did, cause something that creates harm with their words. And the truth is that people of color and the police, a person of color was not going to be surprised by what happened, by this coining of Chinese virus, because people of color in their relationship with the police in our country do not have a protective relationship. And the relationship is not just not being protected, it is a position of terror. As we can see, 6 years ago, we had another man of color strangled by a police officer.
Your 3 minutes is up, so if you could wrap it up.
Oh, thank you. So what I'm going back to is taking police out of schools. I'm also a teacher, and we do know that police and people of color, police are not they're a triggering presence. And it is systematically proven that it is not a kind presence. So I don't think we can have police officers in our schools and expect our children of color to be able to learn, because the police themselves intimidation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gist.
They need to be removed.
Who's next, Mr. Faust?
We have Robin Francis.
Okay, Miss Francis?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak. My name is Robin Francis. I live at 701 East High Street in Charlottesville, Virginia. I have a son who is special needs and had been attending Jackson Via. And I have to tell you, first of all, thank you all for giving us a chance to have this forum. I am grateful that the Charlottesville City Schools has come to the conclusion that so many of us already have, that the SROs absolutely need to be removed from the schools. I unfortunately have on 2 occasions seen the SROs involved in, one SRO involved in a physical incident with a small child. And in both cases, it was a child of color. Small Black children were involved in 2 cases, and getting physical with the kids in situations where it just wasn't warranted. And we're talking about an elementary school. So I firmly agree with the last parent who spoke. I believe that whatever the original point of the program was in the beginning, it has devolved into something that is destructive and something that does not encourage a sense of community, as opposed to creating a sense of fear. I can't tell you how terrifying it was to watch a small child go through what she went through at the hands of that SRO. And it's something that I would never want anyone to see. As a person of color, I can't even begin to explain it. But what I can tell you is this, that we need to create an environment where our children feel safe. And the SRO program does not achieve that. I believe that we need to take that money and reinvest it into, yes, we're counselors. Yes, better training for our teachers and our administrators. And yes, more resources for the students. We do not need SROs. And I think the sooner that they can be removed, the better for our schools and for our students and for our community. I thank you for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Francis. Mr. Frost?
We have Nancy Carpenter.
Okay, Ms. Carpenter, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Very good. Good evening. My name is Nancy Carpenter, and I live in the Rose Hill neighborhood of the city. I am not a parent of any child in the public school system at this moment, but I do want to uplift those commenters that have come before me and have talked about the SROs and how they are not a positive force in the school. I also feel that way. I also am looking at children that not only, as you know, we know from day to day in quote unquote a normal school session, are now also dealing with 6 months of additional traumas in regards to housing instability, their parents' income, the tension that are in those households, and everything that's going to be ongoing throughout this summer. And I don't believe, after reading and the different articles that have come out, looking at what's going on in different communities, that school resource officers have ever belonged in the school. I mean, historically, they weren't really funded in different school systems until we suffered the tragedy of Columbine High School. And then it looks like a lot of funding went away when we had that massive recession in 2008. And then it looks like, you know, we had 2013, more and more communities were investing sort of in these folks after Sandy Hook. These people are not reading coaches, math coaches, language coaches. They're not special needs trained people. The incident that the previous speaker spoke about a young child being bullied and threatened and intimidated by someone much larger than them with some type of official, perhaps authority badge on them or whatnot, is a scar that you carry with you your whole life. So I think that the school board was correct and took the right step in dismantling the MOU, but don't bring back another model. There's not another model out there that's going to work. You need to be able to have this $300,000 to mitigate the trauma that these children of all ages and all needs are going through since March 13th or even before March 13th, and will be ongoing throughout the rest of the summer. So our school system needs to be more, I believe, focused on those kinds of issues. And, you know, if you want to talk about security, ask the kids that were at Parkland High School on Valentine's Day a few years ago what they think about their school resource officer and what the video showed that they did. Okay, so thank you for your time this evening. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Faust?
Next is John Wells.
Mr. Wells, I've tried. Thank you for your, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for your time this evening. I commend the conversation around and the swift action regarding the MOU on SROs that we've seen just in the news flow today. I guess that's good news. Now there is money available. We can do the same with the budget review and reductions from your May 7th meeting. Specifically, removing elementary school Spanish from my point of view, widens the equality and inclusion gap for our native Spanish speakers. Also, the elimination of the second grade IAs widens the equality gap in terms of learning, especially during this period of virtual learning caused by the virus. I've offered to look at and analyze the budget line items that you reviewed after you were forced to make cuts, and to return the programs I just mentioned and cut expenses elsewhere. I ask that the board please reinstate these programs for the fall. And if the MOU for SROs can be removed so quickly, it would appear that you guys can do the work and get these things into the school year for 2021. Finally, I want to express that I believe keeping the students out of school, physically out of school in the fall, will systematically widen the equality gap between well-resourced and under-resourced students. And I know your hands are somewhat tied in terms of what the state decides, but please consider this and make every effort to have school in the physical sense in the fall. I appreciate the time and the ability to chat with you guys tonight. And I am located at 1122 East Jefferson Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Lillian Mcvey.
Hi, Ms. McVey, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lillian Mcvey, and I live off of Ridge Street. I do not have a child in the school system, but I do come from a perspective of working for the city of Charlottesville in human services with children in elementary school and adolescents inside the school system, as well as school counseling. So I would just like to say that I really appreciate you all removing police officers from the school system. From years of working with students, I have heard some really traumatic stories about students' interactions with police officers in the school system. So I really would like to say I appreciate, and I know that there's a lot of people who appreciate this decision. I would also like to raise up and reinforce the conversation about backing school counselors, especially with school counseling being defunded statewide. And also with Medicaid removing TDT from schools, and that I know that that's happening really soon. I worry about there being mental health supports in the school system for students. So I would just like to say, like, I appreciate that. And I know that as you're looking towards like new models to be put in place, police officers never had any reason to be in the school system in the first place. And there's a lot of trained mental health counselors that can take the role of ensuring students' safety. What I've heard from parents who are concerned about police officers being removed, it all comes down to them saying that it's a safety issue, that they worry what will happen if their child leaves the school. There are a lot of practitioners in this area that are trained to do so. So I would encourage using the budget towards hiring more mental health professionals in the school, especially as TDT ends. And as well as addressing the problem of the disproportionate amount of white mental health practitioners in the school system. I think that the Charlottesville and the county school system both need to address bringing in more Black and people of color to work in the mental health field inside of the school. That's all I have to say, and thank you for my time.
Thank you so much, Ms. McVey. Appreciate it.
We have Amy Marshall.
Hi, Ms. Marshall. Thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes. Ms. Marshall, you're on. I can't hear you.
She is unmuted on our side.
Okay, can we return to her in a moment, Mr. Frost?
Sure can. And so, Amy, I'm going to, well, actually, I'll leave you there and see if you can figure it out. And in the meantime, we will allow Miss Amy Woolard to speak.
Okay, Ms. Woolard, you have 3 minutes.
Chairperson McKeever, good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the issue of school policing in Charlottesville schools. I am Amy Woolard. I'm an attorney and policy coordinator for the Legal Aid Justice Center here in town. I'm also a Charlottesville City resident. I live in Belmont. I've been here for the great majority of the last 30 years. I want to start by commending board member Morsberger, community groups like the Charlottesville chapter of Black Lives Matter, FAR, the People's Coalition, the Hate Free Schools Coalition, and individual community members for calling the question of the division's use of school resource officers to a level of true public engagement where we can talk about the structural harms and individual challenges that policing systems in schools have brought most acutely to Black students here in Charlottesville and across the Commonwealth. We commend and support the decision announced earlier today to cease the MOU, and we stand ready to support with any information or assistance that might be helpful as we as a community develop a plan for what's next. We strongly encourage the school board to commit to an open, transparent, community-driven process to reimagine the ways we define and implement what's known as school safety. Safety in our schools for our students and staff cannot continue to primarily be defined as policing, punishment, and push out, as it has until now, most glaringly for Black students. Both the data and the lived experiences of so many students and families bear this out. The trauma these youth and families have experienced through the criminalization of the school space has a direct effect on their educational progress and mental and physical health. Research has shown no evidence that police make our schools safer. To the contrary, more police officers in schools are associated with lower achievement results for students of color, including lower graduation rates and higher rates of exclusionary discipline. And we celebrate this decision to end the current MOU as an important step towards reimagining our school system and how these decisions affecting students' lives and education are made. School is not just a place for student achievement and opportunity, but must also give space and grace to lift up youth, to acknowledge that making mistakes is a part of childhood, to allow them to learn and recover from mistakes, and to help them learn and apply conflict resolution skills for themselves in an environment free from threat of force or trauma. And finally, we urge you to ensure that What's Next provides an open, meaningful process and offers decision-making power for students and communities who have been subject to punitive systems for so long. We urge you to make investments in the kinds of supports, opportunities, and staff that will not just ensure students survive, but thrive. Trauma-informed school counselors and other support staff, restorative practices programs, and extracurricular activities that meet the needs and joys youth themselves express. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Woolard.
we'll go back to Amy Marshall.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Marshall.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Yay. Okay. Well, first of all, I am Amy Sarah Marshall. I live at 216 Chestnut Street, and I'm speaking both as the mother of an 8th grader going into 9th grade at Buford, going into CHS, and as president of the Charlottesville Pride Community Network. So in the past, I definitely have addressed this body before, it's been a while, but about how there needs to be safe space training to support the LGBTQ youth, as well as employees and parents at every level of our school system. Right now, and it is Pride Month, but I'm not feeling very prideful or happy, obviously, with the things going on in the world. And I echo the SRO decision with, again, the understanding that we can't just remove oppression, we need to address what's going on with kids. LGBTQ youth of color are at even a bigger risk of isolation, depression, having no safe space to be themselves or to talk to an adult about what's going on with them than their white peers. And so in advocating for there to be some kind of addressing of LGBTQ youth, I am advocating that within an intersectional lens. And it is happening that kids are discovering they're trans or gay when they're in elementary school and when they're in middle school. And not only that, but I can tell you that both of my children in the city schools have heard homophobic and racial slurs used together and used often at every single grade they've been in. So kids are, right now, Charlottesville High School has gotten training and there's a GSA and it's, there's supportive teachers, but this kind of oppression and this kind of bias and stigma grows right from the beginning. And our school system needs to start addressing actively and proactively how kids talk to each other, the words they're using, and not just, don't hit each other. We need to start with, why are you calling somebody, a faggot, which is something that my kids have heard over and over again, as well as being bullied for having 2 moms. And as Pride, we had an event at Buford, and I had like numbers, so many kids of color come up to us and talk about being gay or having a gay person in their family. But you never see those kids coming to the GSA that was tried to start this last year. So I just hurt for them, and we're doing work. We're trying to gather together people to look at how we can support youth, but the schools really need to be in there. And that can be trauma-informed counselors, but it needs to be, everybody in the environment, from the lunch people to the bus drivers. Everybody needs to be listening to what the children are saying to each other.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Have a good day. Thanks. Mr. Faust?
Mandy Hoy.
Okay, Ms. Hoy, thank you. You have 3 minutes. Ms. Hoy, I can't hear you.
Ms. Hoy is still muted.
Okay, well, that would explain it.
Sorry about that.
There, she's
Oh,
good.
that's okay. I'll restart you in 3
Got
minutes.
it? Okay. I sent this as a letter, or an email, but I'll say it again. My name's Mandy Hoy. I live at 114 Northwood Circle. And I am the parent of a child who went through the system from K through 12, but also I work for the schools. And I wanted to say how heartbreaking it was to see the division address the budget shortfall that others have spoken of by eliminating frontline positions at the elementary level and the counselor at Walker. These are decisions that will have an immediate and a direct and a discernible negative impact on our students when they're going to be coming back to school needing way more support rather than less support. And that was just so heartbreaking and troubling to see that decision made, and to see it made so quickly, and to see it made without getting community input and in a way that seemed not transparent. And so I wondered two things. First, if there had been discussion of eliminating administrative positions rather than direct student contact positions, or considering doing pay cuts like the federal stimulus checks, wherein maybe our highest wage earners would take the largest percentage cut so that the division's lowest wage earners, who already, many of whom are living paycheck to paycheck, would not be so affected, nor would their students. So I'm hopeful that if further cutbacks are necessary, you all will consider furloughs perhaps, and if furloughs are necessary, that you would consider furloughing staff who do not have direct student contact before furloughing staff who do, or eliminating positions of staff who do not have student contact rather than staff who do. And thank you for your time. I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Ms. Hoy. Mr. Faust, has anybody come through?
That's all that have their hands raised this time.
Okay. We have a few comments in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that we made those comments part of the record. Is there any way to do that, or are the Sauls willing to come and raise their hand and speak, or they mostly just said, well, they said, asked about childcare and remote learning and telework options for teachers and staff who might be at risk for COVID. So if there's no one else, I definitely want to put those part of the record, but I also think we'll be answering some of those questions in our on our agenda. So I just wanted to, is there anybody else who's signed up or raised their hand? Mr. Faust?
Grace Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Faust. Ms. Kennedy, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I will preface this by saying that I am white and I do not have a child in the school system. Having attended multiple protests in the last week and research that I've done anyway, there is a disproportionate amount of the faculty throughout the United States being white. Now, according to the Charlottesville City Schools website, 30.8% of the student body is Black, and lower percentages for other people of color, and white being around 42, I believe it said. In part of creating this safe space for the children, and we're getting rid of SROs, that's great. But at the same time, I'm agreeing with the majority of the people that spoke. Counselors are a key thing. With that $300,000 available, I feel the best way to go with that, to invest in the schools and thus in the community, is to make sure that the teachers and administrators, all the staff, reflect the children that are in the systems. We need people of color to be teachers. We need them to feel that they are in a safe space, and having someone that looks like them, you really can't, you can't measure how important that is for a child to see someone like them, to feel comfortable. And I think we're making steps in the right direction, but if we could make class sizes a little, smaller, that's been a huge benefit for schools across the country. Having more counselors, having a safe space because the administrators look like them will make a huge difference. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Anybody else, Mr. Faust?
Nobody else has raised their hand.
Thank you, everybody. Just FYI, I think we'll, to the extent that it's possible, the chat will become part of the record in some way. I just want to make sure of that. So hopefully people can be respectful in the chat. So I think we're going to move on from the comments from members of the community. I want to say thank you to everybody who made those comments. I think we'll have the opportunity to respond as a board later when we have comments from the board. And then, of course, we have pretty significant opportunities to discuss the agenda items. So I just wanted to say, just because we're not responding right now to those comments doesn't mean that we will not during the course of our meeting. So to that end, I would, we have number 6 on our agenda is the consent agenda. Anybody would like to make a motion about the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda, Madam Chair.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Purrier and Ms. Torres. Any comments? Let's see. Any comments, Dr. Kraft?
Yes, my comment is just, I was glad to see the revised pay scale for salary scale for school psychologists. And I just want to say that while it's a step, it's really low still. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. It's it's low, and I think if we are going to be able to attract experienced and qualified school psychologists, I hope we can keep working on having salaries at least commensurate with Harrisonburg. So just wanted to mention it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kraft. Let's see. I think right now we're going to call the roll for the vote on the consent agenda.
Okay. Mr. Bryan?
Yes.
Ms. Bryson Mercer?
Yes.
Dr. Kraft?
Yes.
Ms. McKeever?
Yes.
Ms. Purrier?
Yes.
Ms. Torres?
Ms. Torres?
Sorry, I froze there. Yes.
And Mr. Wade?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Green. The first item on the items for discussion is the student resource officers in schools. I'm just going to briefly, and not the whole thing, read from the press statement that we released today, just so that everybody can be on the same page about what we're talking about. So the Charlottesville City Schools, the Charlottesville City School Board, and the Charlottesville Police Department and the City of Charlottesville have mutually agreed to discontinue the Memorandum of Understanding that places school resource officers in the city's schools. This is the latest step in a months-long process of updating the existing MOU, a process slowed down by the school closure due to COVID-19. So the pre-closure staffing of SROs in the schools posted officers at CHS and Buford with a roving officer at the elementary schools. During the school closure, all SROs have been reassigned to other patrols. Financially, the MOU included a $3,000 annual transfer from the schools to the police to cover the expenses associated with the SROs assigned to the schools. These funds would be available to support the new model. And that is what we're going to, Dr. Atkins is going to talk about next, is what given that safety of our staff and students is the most important concern that this school board has, how we move forward and what we're looking to do in the future. Dr. Atkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. McKeever. I want to make a statement before I do a very brief presentation on our steps forward to create a new pathway. And the statement is about school safety and student well-being. For a number of months, as Ms. McKeever has said, we have been in discussion with the Charlottesville Police Department about revisions to our Memorandum of Understanding. This process was delayed by the COVID-19 outbreak, but we've realized that we needed to bring in additional resources and perspectives in that discussion. Today, the Charlottesville City School Board, the Charlottesville City, and the City Police issued a joint statement, as we have said, ending our MOU and calling for a time of public discussion to chart the best pathway forward. One thing is clear in our decisions with the police and the city. We have a shared priority to focus on physical safety and social well-being of our entire school division community. Among the resources we have, there's a great deal of literature and studies that have been published on the subject, including state reports. There are national groups that have recommendations, and we can also look around the country for other models that we can learn from. Among the perspectives we need to listen to is a long list of stakeholders. We've heard from many people. We've reached out to others, and we will continue to reach out. Over the years, as the schools have explored different issues, community members have repeatedly reminded us to listen to our teachers and students, and we fully intend to do that in this case. Other than our shared priority, we have already heard and expect to hear a wide variety of perspectives on this issue. And all of those varying perspectives will lead us to the best pathway forward. For the timeline on which we are working, we will spend the first half of the summer researching and listening. The second half, we'll begin crafting a plan for approval. As we gain approval from our school board, we will then begin implementation. In conclusion, in his press conference this week, Governor Northam addressed national protests focused on policing. We know that nationally, the need for police reform is a big and a very painful issue. We intend to follow Governor Northam's advice of listening to wise and informed people as we move forward. Thankfully, the Charlottesville community and our school community are filled with such people. Thank you. I'd like to present to you our school's safety and student well-being process for moving forward. First of all, I want to emphasize that we have shared priorities throughout our community and our school division. Next slide, please. The physical safety and social and emotional well-being of our students and our staff, that will be our #1 priority in our discussions and in the development of a model that will provide for all of our stakeholders. As we move forward to set up a timeline and a process by which we engage our communities, we're going to use a number of resources. Next slide. Here's a list, some of the resources that we will use, and I'm sure there will be other resources that will come forward. The scholarly literature and studies. We have already had members of the University of Virginia School of Law reach out to us and offer to partner with us, and we appreciate that, and we intend to take advantage of that offer. We'll use state reports will use best practices. And there are a number of groups around the country that have been engaged in research and developing best practices for safe and sound schools. We'll also use models from other communities, alternate models from other communities to help us to better understand what might work and to develop the model for Charlottesville City Schools. There are, the next page, Jeff, thank you. There are a number of stakeholders who will be involved. We will actively seek their input and use that input in developing a new model. Certainly our school board, our leaders, our administration in the school division. Key components to this discussion will be our teachers, our leaders, and our staff, our families, and our students. Our students are the ones who are in the schools, who hear and see and engage with our resource officers. Our families, we want our city leaders, we want our city police department, our police leaders to be included, including our SROs to be a part of the stakeholder discussion. We want the entire Charlottesville community and all of our partners to be a part. The decisions that we have to make are important decisions, and having all of our stakeholders and community members and partners involved will give us a much better and richer outcome. The timeline for making the decisions. So today, June 11th, we issued the joint statement discontinuing the MOU. From today through July 15th, we'll have feedback sessions. We will publicly post those sessions and give our community members an opportunity to sign up to be a part of. Those sessions will be virtual. They're very creative ways in our virtual world that we can set up discussions and discussion boards, discussion groups, and we plan to take advantage of all of those tools. During that July 11th through 15th timeframe, there will be numerous opportunities for us to gather and to have that discussion. Between the 15th of July and August the 15th, we'll be developing a new model. And then we will bring that new model to our school board. And after our school board has had an opportunity to review that model and to take action on it, once they have approved the model, then we will go about the implementation of the model. So as you can see, we will be providing multiple opportunities to get the feedback, the input from the community that will be vital to the development and the success of any model that we put in our schools. Our focus, again, will be on school safety and student and staff well-being. Ms. McKeever?
Yes, ma'am.
That is that presentation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that the board members may have.
Can I just clarify with respect to the feedback sessions, like who is going to be involved in that?
Well, let's go back to our.
I'm looking at the timeline right now.
Yes, let's go back to the stakeholders.
Okay, so there will be members of, I mean, because like, you know, receiving the input and hearing the input is a vital part of the process. So I just wonder.
Yes, we'll have all of these are our stakeholders that will be our community members, our partners in the community, the various organizations that are part of our community. We'll also have our city leaders, our students, families, teachers. We would welcome all of them to be a part of the stakeholder discussions. It will be a virtual forum that we will have. We'll have multiple, at least 3 forums that community members will have an opportunity to be a part of.
Okay, Ms. Thacker, can I not look at the screen anymore? Can we bring it back to our board so that we can kind of have a discussion? Thank you. Hi, guys. So I would like to kind of go in order, like not in order. I don't have any order particularly, but who would like to speak first or have questions first? And I can't see.
Dr. Atkins,
Okay,
this is Mrs. Spurrier. I have a question. Thank you for all of your diligent work around this issue. As it relates to the timeline, you gave some dates, and I know they are fluid. When we get to the point of a draft that the school board will review at some point in August, then if there are things that need to be tweaked from that draft, we will have an opportunity to go back and do that prior to moving into implementation. Am I correct?
You are correct. Yes.
Okay.
We'll have an opportunity to tweak after the board gives input, but prior to bringing it to the board, we're going to develop a draft model that our community will have an opportunity to give input prior to it coming to the board. And then after the board, the community will continue to have opportunity for input.
Okay. My next question is regarding the list of stakeholders, students, staff, families, yada, 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 yada. As it relates to the board, if it's more than 3 of us, then that is considered a meeting. Are you anticipating that board members would be a part of the other community platforms, or will we have a special meeting where the board meets without others? I'm just trying to figure out how that will roll out, because we don't want to do anything to be in violation of state code.
This per year, if you recall, when we had our community forums on equity, our board members were present at all of those forums. We were very intentional in having our board members in strategic areas of the room so that they were not in a group, and that there was no discussion amongst board members. The board members were in separate groups, talking with our community and having input. So we would anticipate a similar model where our board members will be a part of all of the forums. We will notice those forums so that our board members can attend.
Dr. Atkins, can I just really, I feel like I don't want to, I know we have a lot of other board members who have a lot of comments, so I'm not trying to take up a lot of time, but I feel like we need to have a committee or a task force that, because you keep talking about we, and I don't know who that is. I know that, you know, we're going to receive input from all of the stakeholders, but I wonder who's going to develop the model based on that input. And I think that might require a committee of stakeholders. More or less, you know, I don't know what your vision is for that, but I don't know who the we is, but that's what I'm trying to get at, if that makes sense.
Not quite sure. The we is the board members, central office staff, our teachers, our students. We have a broad forum that we are inviting our teachers and our students, our community members, to be a part of that discussion. So it would be in a format similar to this, where we're inviting our community. For those individuals who may not be familiar with some of the features on Zoom, Zoom allows us to break up into groups. It allows us to pose questions to the group and the stakeholders that are on the Zoom call or the format that the webinar that we have. That allows for some discussion boards in those breakout groups, and then it allows for us to come back together to continue discussion and to have feedback from all of the stakeholders, just as we would do in a face-to-face forum. And Mr. Faust.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you help me with that? The
with
format?
the groups?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking about the format of a forum. I'm asking about what we're going to do with all that input at the end, and who's going to help at that point. I mean, I remember our equity forums and like there was a lot of like that you and Beth Chuck, and there was like Denise Johnson, like there was a lot of people who helped to come up with what we were going to do with the equity. But I think in this I don't know who the we is who's going to receive it and then develop the model based on the input that we receive. And that is the last time I will mention that. I do not want to keep this anymore. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to go back into Zoom capabilities. I believe that we can do amazing things on Zoom.
Can I add some questions and comments if you're done?
I would like to get a response from Dr. Atkins.
Okay.
Ms. McKeever, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to answer your question, but I would find myself repeating the same thing.
Okay.
We is central office staff and all of those stakeholders, that input will be gathered through very strategic questions, very strategic scenarios, using the research that we will be getting from throughout the country, best practices, models that are in the, throughout the country, presenting those to our groups, getting feedback on them, picking the best parts of those for discussion and analysis.
Okay.
Does that help?
Ms. Bryson-Morsberger?
Yeah, a few things. I wanted to add when you were listing the stakeholders, that we make an effort to include local activists, our local Charlottesville Black Lives Matters group, the Legal Aid Justice Center, they were just on offering their services, but to make sure that we're including people who have been developing plans and talking about these things for a while, to make sure that they are included. And I also wanted to ask if, I know it's a work in progress, but to put a clear timeline up for public comment, and also a clear timeline as to when a draft will be made available to the public with plenty of time in advance before the meeting where we would vote on it. And then the last question I had, well, okay, one other comment. Also, people to include for stakeholders. There have been a lot of people referencing people they know who have had interactions that were not the best or were horrible with SROs, but I think it's really important to include people who have had those interactions as stakeholders at the table, even if they just don't want to be public, but to provide some input. And it's really, in trying to find out incidents or things that have happened in the schools, it's really hard. It's really muddy to find like particular incident reports and to actually get the numbers and to find out. But there should be a way to contact those people. And then the last question is for Dr. Atkins. Do you anticipate that this new model will use up the entire $300,000?
Ms. Bryson-Morsberger. I'm not sure on the last part of your question is about the use of the funds that will be available. I think once we build the model, we'll have a better sense of the funds and the cost of that model, so we can give you more detail about that once we've had more input from our community about what that model will look like. I do anticipate there will be a cost that's associated with that. So we'll work on that and get that back to you. I totally agree. The list of stakeholders that stakeholder categories that I have here are not exhaustive. And those partners and community members that you have mentioned will be important stakeholders. And maybe it will add clarity if I see that much of what we're going to do will be open to all of our stakeholders. When we see, as people are signing up to be a part of this discussion, that some of these groups have not signed up, we'll reach out to them individually and ask them to please sign up and be a part of the discussion.
Okay.
So thank you for including those groups.
And the last question, the new model, when we're talking about including the stakeholders, the SROs the contract is ended. So are they needed in the new conversation or the new model or the new plan?
SROs have been, have had a valuable role in our school system. They certainly served us well. As I talked with many of our staff members and got input from them, I found that our staff members have very fond and warm thoughts toward our SROs, and they have been beneficial to them. Excluding one area of our community in this discussion, I think would leave a hole that is important that we fill that with the voices of our entire community in developing a pathway forward. Our schools are important not only to us, our parents and our families, but I believe our schools and the safety and the well-being of our students is important to our entire community.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm glad that we're creating this type of buy-in from the community. I just wanted to add, when, first of all, this is by far from the 15 years I've been on the board, got more input from the community. I mean, it's in the hundreds of emails that we receive on this, and primarily they were in support of ending the contract. And it really blew me away of the input that we received on this. I kind of went an extra step and reached into my deep contacts into the community in Prospect and West Haven and various parts of the community to my mentees and people that I know, and asked them what their thoughts are on SROs. And I, first of all, I want to say that, I think that there should be some type of revisions and changes to the agreement, and we're doing that. But I was surprised that every one of them, to the person, said that that they supported having SRO officers in the schools. And some of my young boys I work with, they're not angels. They've had interactions with SRO officers. So the feedback, and I think that we need to get those that are that have been active in the community and providing comments, but we also need to make sure we reach outside of that, because those aren't individuals that would never sent us an email. These are the moms, the single moms that I've reached out to. They are in support of it as well. We just make sure we need to get those voices that we don't hear all the time as well. I think that's critical, because I've been in this business long enough that, we have to listen to all voices, not only those that make the most noise. This community is, we have enough resources in this community that I think we can get everyone's input and come up with a plan that everyone is happy with. And so I love the approach that you're taking, the input that we're going to be getting from the community. And I'm looking forward to, provide any input that I can, but mainly the input from the community is going to be vital in this, because it's their children, it's their schools, and we need to hear what they want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Dr. Kraft, do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really pleased to see us going in this direction. I don't know that I have questions so much, but just a few thoughts. But I'm really pleased to see us going in this direction. And I appreciate the input that we've gotten from the community. I think it's been, as Mr. Wade said, it's been extraordinary, actually, to see this and to sort of see people really wanting to address injustice and racism wherever it is in the community, and people feeling like they can come to us, they can tell us what they think, I think is wonderful. I also would echo what Mr. Wade said. However, I feel like we've heard a whole lot from a part of the community, but I personally haven't heard enough from other parts of our school division community, including those who are in the building all day, our kids and our teachers. So I want to make sure that we do that we include those voices, and I'm sure that we will do that we really do have all stakeholders. and including as part of the conversation that we do get feedback from our SROs who have been in our community and have gotten to know many of our kids. I think to leave them out would be a mistake. One suggestion would be, I guess, that when we have these forums, I think it would be really helpful that they have two purposes. One would be to get feedback to help us formulate our model, but the other one would be kind of an educational process. So most of us don't really know what these other alternative models might look like. And I think it would be really helpful for all of us to hear, what our research has come up with, and just to present that here are some ideas. Here's what they're doing in this school division, and how they're doing it differently. So I would hope that these forums would also include some education for our community as we go along. And then finally, just to address Jennifer's question earlier, I think I heard it in a way to say that, who's organizing this? Who's really in the end, or being, who's putting it together and putting it back out as a plan? And I'd like to reference our equity work because I think that was an excellent model for how we got input from our community and how we then put it together and formulated it into a plan. And I think that worked quite well. And I'm hoping that we can have a similar process here. And yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft. Ms. Purrier, did you have anything else you wanted to add before I go to Mr. Bryant?
No, I got my questions asked, and I don't think it's necessary to make any comments.
Okay. Mr. Bryant, do you have anything to add? You have a unique perspective.
Yes, I do. Of my 29 years, 39 years in education, 29 of those years was in the Charlottesville public schools. So I can remember SROs for as long as I can remember, and how important they were in the schools and how they interacted with the children. But in saying that, as we move forward with the new model and implementing the new model, and I agree with Juan and Dr. Kraft, we need to have, and I thank all of those who contacted us. I'd like to thank each of those people who contacted us by email in regards to their stance on SROs, but also we need to have voices from the whole community, especially those voices who sometimes are unheard, those in public housing. That's extremely important. Those persons in our community who are retired, who may not have children in our schools. So we need to have everybody at the table. So once this model is composed and implemented, we would have had input from everybody. I think that's extremely important. And even we need to have input from our clergy, from both Black and white congregations, those ministers that represent those congregations. I think we need to have their perspective too, as well.
Mr. Bryant, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Ms. Torres, like I said, I don't see you on my screen, but I would love it if you have any comments. I would love to call on you.
I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
I can see you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I heard Ms. McKeever's statement a little bit differently, so I just kind of wanted to repeat that she, her question really, I think, focused more about the phase of the July 15th through August, when we're actually developing the new model part, Dr. Atkins, like who will be developing that. I mean, after we've had the forums, we've received everything, we've reviewed best practices and all of the research that's available. Will there be a committee of people sitting together to actually develop that new model? So I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what I heard Ms. McKeever asking. As far as the forums, I look forward to those. I think as far as the equity forums that we had in the past, I agree. I think they were done well, and I'm hoping that we also can offer the opportunity for people to just leave comments online more anonymously if they have experiences or views that they'd like to share that way. And also just kind of wanted to quickly acknowledge and express my gratitude to all of the people that reached out to us over the last week or two via email. Really wanted to say thank you to the parents who spoke during public comment initially during the meeting, kind of giving both ends or two different views as far as experiences with the SROs. And I think those voices are critical to hear. And I think we all recognize those different experiences. And I appreciate you taking the time to speak out with us in the meeting. And just wanted to thank again, Ms. McKeever and Dr. Atkins and the mayor and Chief Brackney, because I know that you guys had been working on this. As you have said, you've been working on the MOU for months, and it kind of got waylaid by other things. So I know this was something that was important to all of us as board members to look at as far as what the best model or a different model needed to be. And so here we are. And I just wanted to express gratitude to you guys for your statement today. And thanks to everybody else.
So, Dr. Atkins or Madam Chair, do we need a motion for this to move forward, or?
I think Dr. Atkins would like to see us take some action here in terms of her timeline and the stakeholders, and I think including some of the, discussion that we just had.
So, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. But before we move on, I would just like to add one component of the feedback portion, and that is to have the principals or someone in the schools, the buildings, to do an extra reach out to, because I really think that you're going to get the real feedback by just reaching out, and you can even randomly call some parents and to get their feedback. And for me, it took several tries, because kids are busy, you have to, some of them, you have to reach them in different formats. But I got some really good, information from them. And I feel like if we just, put a notice up or ask for we may not get as rich a feedback as we might do if we maybe do some a little bit more proactive outreach. Is that something that we can add to a part of this, Dr. Atkins?
Absolutely, we can. I think that's going to be an important part of it. And I do want to say that we have already started that outreach. I had members of the equity, one of our members of the equity committee, to give me the names of some individuals to contact. We've contacted parents, a couple of our students. We've contacted our teachers and our staff members. I took page after page of notes from those individuals. Some of the comments that I was hearing is that from a parent, she said that the resource officers had been good to her students, and that there were good things happening, that her daughter felt good about the relationship that she had. One of our parents and community members said that there's a need to make some changes with our SRO program, and that the community needs to know what SROs actually do in the schools. For the times and oftentimes that when they're there and people don't know what they're doing, they do fill in that gap with, they have to be there for surveillance and looking for something to happen to students. Another parent said, yes, change the resource officer. They don't have a role in the schools. Other teachers and staff members said they feel very secure in the schools with their resource officers. They have a wonderful relationship with the resource officers, and they've watched students. One of our staff members said she has seen numerous times where students have just stopped in the hallway to have a conversation with the resource officers. And she went on to say they would not have that, stop a resource officer or a police officer on the street and have a conversation. So there was an opportunity for very positive exchanges. There's another staff member who said that although she sees the resource officers as a positive in the school, she is very aware of the perception from other members of the staff and from the community, and their perception is reality. And with that, we are obligated to examine what's the best model for our students. So I think we continue to gather that kind of information and be very intentional about reaching out and inviting members of our community from all segments, and especially with an eye on equity, to be a part of these discussions as we go along. I would propose that when we get to the development of the model, that we use a similar format that we use during our equity forums, that a committee will be looking at it. We use staff to get all of that information together. And then we planned another meeting with our community to go back and say, this is what we thought we heard from you. Would you validate what we heard in that model? So we propose to use a similar model where once we start developing the model, we can use a committee format on that, made up of members who have been a part of the forums, that we then take the model back out to our community through in a forum process, get additional feedback to validate that we actually heard what we thought we heard, and to get their impressions of the new model, and before we bring it to our school board.
Yeah, I want to thank you and Jennifer before I make the motion, because you all both have responded to the hundreds and hundreds of emails that we have received, and I want to know the public know that although I may not have read every word, that I did scan them all, and we heard you, and we're gonna take action. We're gonna get input from the whole community, and we're gonna come up with a plan that everyone may not be happy with, but we believe that it's going to reflect the what the community wants. So, with that being said,
one thing. Can I add one more thing, Mr. Wade, before the motion? I just feel like I need to say one more thing, which is I feel like this is an opportunity to create, this model and lead as we have done in the past with respect to, like the dress code and Confederate imagery. I am really grateful for the input that we received, and we do rely on our community for this input. And I know that we're going to rely on our community to help us develop this new model. And I also want to tell our staff and our students, this is really to support you all, and we're not going to leave anybody behind. This is going to be student-centered. It's about student well-being and about building and school security. That is our goal always. And I just don't want you to think we're, because as this MOU has been discontinued, that we've taken everything and put it aside. That is not true. We're centering student well-being, and we're centering our staff well-being, and our school security. I think it's all possible. And I also want to say that we have a real opportunity to create something that can lead our nation. Like I not to be too hyper, used too exaggerated here, but I think we can really do something special here. And we have a lot of knowledge in this town, and I look forward to hearing what people have to say in the coming months. So thank you, Mr. Wade. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
1 second, if you're about to bring up forward the motion, I just wanted to ask if you could clarify what exactly the motion is that you're bringing forward. Is it about the timeline?
Well, I'm going to move that we approve Dr. Atkins' proposal to replace SRO officers. Is that sufficient, or should I make it more robust, Madam?
I think just with the recommendations that the superintendent has put forward regarding the timeline and the stakeholders, and including, this discussion. I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Atkins? You're muted. Sorry.
Ms. Bryson Morseberger, you asked about the end time. Was that one of your questions you wanted to know?
I just wanted to know, like, whenever we're going to vote on the draft, how much notice the public will get to the draft so that there's adequate public notice of what we've come to and what we'll be voting on.
What I'd like to do is our students are scheduled to return to school on August the 19th. So I'd use all of our time between now and the 19th in developing that model. I also would propose to the school board that we have 2 board meetings in August, that at the first board meeting in August, which is August the 6th, that we give you an update on where we are with what we've heard and where we are in the development of the model. And then we schedule a second board meeting sometime either the 17th or the 18th of August to bring back a more developed model to the school board. And at that point, I'd like the school board to determine whether they feel that model is developed well enough to move it forward and give us feedback on that. I'd love to have a model in place when our schools open for our students, for our teachers, and for our staff.
Okay. So, Dr. Atkins, what should I refer to it as? Model for to replace S?
Actually, it is a model for school safety and student well-being.
Okay.
So I'm asking you to take action on the timeline for developing a school safety, student well-being model.
Okay. Okay. So I move that the school board supports Dr. Atkins' recommendations to develop a model for school safety and student well-being, including timeline and
Stakeholders.
And stakeholders. Yes.
I second it.
I think it's really urgent that we have this in place by the time school starts. So I'm deeply concerned that if we have a meeting that approves it, that implementation will, on the week of the 17th, that it will not necessarily be able to be implemented by the 19th. So I hope that we can, so that's a concern that I have.
Ms. McKeever, we can certainly move that to August the 10th. The week of August the 10th.
I suspect we're going to still be Zooming, so that works for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I also had some concerns just in case there were tweaks. If there's staffing or depending on what that model looks like, have we identified, the personnel or the supports, are they ready and up and running and in the schools? And if not, I hate to be the if not person, but I will be positive that it will all fall into place. But is there opportunity to do some type of, transition or temporary, I don't know, not an MOU, but something, in place at the time that school starts?
I think that's a part of our discussion. I think that's where we get community input and staff input, student input from the forums.
Dr. Kraft, you're muted, but.
Yeah. No, I agree with these comments, and I think that what we're going to come up against is if we're going to be doing something that's actually quite different, that involves a lot more mental health supports, that kind of thing, that's going to require funding. And honestly, $300,000 will not go very far in, hiring more people, more counselors, more social workers, whatever. So there are going to be some challenges that we will be facing. And yeah.
And Dr. Kraft, I will tell you that I was recently on in a meeting with a community, one of our community stakeholders who works with a philanthropic group. And I have presented, and Ms. Torres and I met with our community member, and we talked about our need for more mental health workers in our school, not only to respond to the issues that we're discussing now, but to issues that have arisen as a result of COVID-19 and our students and our teachers' separation from the school and the types of supports that they will need when they come back into our schools, or we have the hybrid model. And so we have been in discussion and seeking some support for the positions that we know we will need in our school system.
I'm really glad to hear that.
And so I thank Ms. Torres for connecting us with the community partner who's really interested in these kinds of issues.
Dr. Atkins, I have a question before we vote on the motion. I hear around the platform that there is some concern, not with the timeline, but if by the time school opens, we're not quite there with the finite document, I know that there will be an alternate plan so that no one will feel unsafe, because if I remember correctly, this is safety and well-being. So could you speak to the fact that if the document is not signed, sealed, and delivered on August 19th, that we in our buildings, our families, and everyone that is involved with this process can feel that when our buildings do open, whether it's the 19th or whenever it may be, because that may change too, based on what happens in July with COVID, that we'll be safe, because you're talking about safety and well-being.
I think, Ms. Puryear, you're making excellent points, and I heard that loud and clear from our principals and our teachers and our students. Feeling secure in an environment is paramount to performing well in that environment. And we cannot lose sight of that. A part of student and staff well-being is feeling secure. So they go hand in hand, and it would be my intent that as we're working with the community and with our stakeholders, that we develop plans that can be implemented, but we keep our eye on the opening of school on August the 19th. And it may not be the full plan, but we have something in place that can assure our students and our teachers and our staff that we have considered safety and security.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and what?
Are we ready to vote?
I was going to just call a question now, and and I guess we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the motion, and Ms. Green is going to call the roll, so feel free to.
Okay, Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Ms. Bryson-Morrisberger,
Aye.
Dr. Kraft,
Yes.
Ms. McKeever,
Yes.
Ms. Puryear,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Wade.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Green, and to the board and to the community and Dr. Atkins and your team, and Chief Brackney and Dr. Richardson, like City Council, the mayor. I mean, it has been a, real effort, and I'm so grateful about where we are and look forward to where we're going. Having said that, there's a lot of other things happening, and to that end, I think we're going to talk with Mr. Henderson about summer school.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Atkins, good evening.
Good evening.
Staff this evening will address an update on Summer Connects, the CCS summer school program. And we would like to proceed with our summer programs coordinator, Neely Minton. We'll start with Summer Thompson, and then at the elementary level, be followed by Adam at Walker, Jesse Turner at Buford, and Eric Irizarry and Jill Daw at the high school level. and they'll share with you what's going on in our summer school program this year. So I'll turn things over to Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Good evening, Dr. Atkins and members of the board. Thank you so much for your work tonight. I am here to co-present with the principals about summer school in 2020. Just to introduce the process to you all, in this environment of COVID and distance learning, we really had to put our heads together and collaborate and reconceptualize what summer school would look like this year. So it definitely looks very different than it has in years past. We held a lot of different collaborative meetings between the coordinators in the division and the principals and came up with this plan together. We also had a lot of teacher input, especially at the K-4 level, in terms of creating our Summer Connect materials. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Summer Thompson, who will take you through K-4 Summer Connect.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to be here tonight and talking to you about what we're doing at the elementary level. So we've got three main purposes. Obviously, we want to keep our kids and families engaged in school. And as we all know, the school year didn't end quite the way that anybody would have hoped. But we're excited to maintain those virtual connections and make them as strong as possible while also helping to support kids in their learning this summer. As far as the wellness and SEL piece goes, some of our kids, for some of them, summer school may be the only connection that they have outside of their family due to the COVID situation. And so we're really looking forward to providing them with some opportunities that will maintain that strong connection with their classmates as well as with a teacher from the school. And then finally, as Neely said, we were really given the opportunity to sort of reinvent what summer school would look like this summer. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but we wanted to provide kids with more integrated learning experiences this summer rather than saying, you're going to do this in reading, you're going to do that in science. We really wanted to have them be a little bit more cross-curricular. And so in the model that we're using, the kids will be studying science and or social studies along with reading through an essential question that all links back together. So as far as the details go, we are going to be having there's a paper component that will be asynchronous, meaning that kids can complete it whenever it works for their families. And then we'll be having those virtual check-ins, feedback sessions, and synchronous class meetings with the teachers. So the teachers have been given approximately 9 hours of FaceTime per week to work with students. And that's, like I said, a combination of the class meetings. Some of them are doing some small group meetings with just 2 or 3 kids, and then some are doing individual sessions. And those have all been planned with parent input on as far as the schedule goes, as well as dependent upon the needs of the child. So these learning explorations, like we said, are on paper, but we do have embedded virtual tools in them. And this arose because the parent and the teacher feedback from this past spring's virtual experience indicated that parents would really love, and teachers would love, to have something paper-based that kids could have at their home as sort of the base from which they're working, with that supplemented by those sessions with the teacher. And then the embedded virtual tools in each of the books, there are lots of QR codes, there are URLs that go to read alouds, links to videos about inventions, and just a lot of really cool stuff. And the curricular team did a wonderful job of compiling those activities for our kids. So we strove to have about 60 students enrolled at each elementary school, and I think we're all really close to that, if not even meeting or exceeding that. And it'll go for 5 weeks. It'll start this coming Monday, and it'll go through the 17th of July. And like I said, we're aiming for about 3 days of instruction per week, but the asynchronous work can be completed throughout the week at the times that work best for each individual family. And then on the next slide, this is just an example of a weekly guide that's included in each of the grade level packets that were mailed to students. And as I said, you can kind of see in the in the first column, the 5 weeks are centered around 3 essential questions, and those questions are the same at every grade level. So that if there are families that have more than one student, they're kind of exploring some of the same things, which I think will be really awesome for the conversations in their homes. And so those questions are: how do I explore science in my life? How am I, or how is my community and world unique and special? And then what does fairness mean? Does fairness mean we all get the same thing? So those are the main questions. Like I said, literacy and either science or social studies are kind of paired together around those essential questions. And then additionally, once per week, and this is going to be, I'm really excited actually to participate in this myself and watch how it goes. Our students are invited to participate in a live Google Meet with Wild Rock. And from what we understand, they're going to be meeting different animals every week. They're going to be creating crafts from materials that Wild Rock sent to them or that are common household materials. They're going to go on outdoor adventures around their home. And so we're excited about that as far as just giving them something new and a little bit more exciting in the summer school experience. So all in all, like I said, we're really excited about what we're able to offer to our kids this year. We've been enjoying having to think outside the box a little bit. And so we're excited to keep our kids engaged.
Good evening. As the slide transitions, I think I'll open with just a thank you to Mr. Henderson. Over the years, summer school has always been something that he has supported, and it's really been his bailiwick. This is the last summer school conversation I might have with Mr. Henderson, at least publicly, and what a privilege and a pleasure that has been over the years. I appreciate that Ms. Thompson talked about explorations. As many of you may know, the Walker Q3 and Q4 program that we did was actually called the Walker Explorations 2020 program. We did that intentionally as we were really looking at ways where kiddos can explore learning in a multidisciplinary cross-subject way. We took in over 10,749 exit tickets or surveys completed by students in the spring to give us feedback about how that instruction was going, in addition to volumes of feedback from parents and teachers. So we are really looking at this as version 2.0 of the online work that we've been doing at Walker. It's called Explorations and Connections because while we've been able to be in contact with all of our families over the end of the year, we recognize that we have work to do to increase family engagement with virtual learning that's going on at Walker. And so our work this summer is twofold. It's both instructional and it's relationship based. We really want to ensure that as we start the fall, in whatever format we start the fall, that all of our families are able to hit the ground running with learning, whether it be in whatever format we choose. And so that's a big part of this work this summer with our teachers who are going to be as much teaching as they are social working. Our program goes from June 15th to July 16th in a Monday through Thursday format. We'll have 90 students who are receiving 2 explorations a week, one in reading and writing, one in mathematics, but then also daily individualized or small group instruction from their teachers. All of the work that we do for our kiddos who are enrolled as part of that 90 will also be made available to the larger Walker School community for those families that want to complete that work. It will just happen in a completely asynchronous environment. So they won't have that benefit of the one-on-one with teachers, but they will have access to those lessons just as students did in our spring explorations program where they could access any of the information that we made available through Canvas. We're excited about it, and it starts in just a couple of days. I'll end with just a big thanks to Mr. Brad Taylor, who is our summer school principal, and he's been doing amazing work to get this program up and running. And with the 6 teachers that we have on board, it's going to be a great team.
Thank you, Dr. Hastings. Buford?
Good evening. At Buford this year, we have our program called the Buford Summer Power. And one of the things that I've been talking about with the admin team as we were developing the concept for this year's work during the summer was we really want to, as our children continue to get older and move through the school and get ready for high school, we want them to understand that they really have a lot of power in terms of how they can control their learning. And we want to continue to be able to facilitate, help them to learn, but that they also have a lot of power in how they learn. And this year, our goal is to strengthen student engagement and enhance their academic skills. Our focus will be to provide instruction for 7th and 8th grade students in the areas of reading, writing, and math. We want to continue to have a laser focus on those 3 areas, not only just for our rising 8th graders, but also for our young people who are heading in to high school. That's the last leg, if you will, and we want them to be as prepared as possible. And we would do that through a virtual learning model, but the focus is also, even though we're virtual, our teachers are going to continue to reach out and keep those strong relationships going with their students. So we're excited about the opportunities that we believe our students will have in this model. And like Walker, we will be starting in just a few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Dr. Irizarry?
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Atkins, Ms. McKeever, School Board. I want to start by just echoing Dr. Hastings' comments. Mr. Henderson, we're really going to miss you. Thanks for all your guidance and everything you've done for all of us, and especially since I've been here. So thank you. CHS summer programs, we're going to offer 2 concurrent summer programs. One is going to be similar to our traditional summer school, which of course will be virtual. It will have Econ Personal Finance, Health 9 and 10, and PE 9 and 10, which are all the graduation requirements. And that will be through our virtual courses that exist currently. The second part of our summer opportunity is going to be the CHS Summer Academy. And that's going to be made available to all of our students needing to complete their coursework from the spring. So teachers will be available on every subject to help students complete those courses. And they will also be there to provide office hours and ongoing academic support. And we will have teachers and staff members also working on our student and family engagement over the summer. We want to make sure that we reconnect with those families, not only the ones participating in these 2 programs, but just our families as a whole as we gear up for the start of next year.
Thank you, Dr. Irizarry. Is that all the comments around summer school?
Jill Dahl.
Jill Dahl, thank you. Appreciate that, Jim. Did I
Thank
mention
you.
we're-
So for Lugo McGinnis, our main focus is to create a continuum of learning for our students who need to finish up spring courses. But we also have several students on our list that finish their classes, but we just feel it important to keep them connected and just weekly check-ins and touching base. And at LMA, our students tend to really thrive on the one-to-one connection. And thank you to Ms. Johnson, who was able to secure a couple of community locations where teachers could meet one-on-one with students with using the social distancing protocols that are in place to provide that face-to-face support for students while we are still working through all the pieces. So that's been really helpful. And our big goal is just really about the connection with we started this week and we go through the 26th, and we will just continue to provide virtual support. We'll continue to provide emotional support, and as needed, students who need paper pencil, who need the packets, they might just do better with that. The exciting piece is just the enthusiasm that the staff has shown towards this new platform, and teachers who weren't as proficient and comfortable maybe with the technology have really come outside their comfort zone, and they're now making videos that, even though they're not teaching summer school, they've created videos for the kids to have access to go through their content with them. So we're just really excited about what's happening with the instruction at Lugo McGinnis, and it's just continuing this summer.
Thank you, Ms. Dahl. Is that all for summer school, Mr. Henderson?
Yes, ma'am. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you, Dr. Hastings and Dr. Irizarry, for reminding us, like, it's very hard because of the way that school has ended to appropriately acknowledge the hard work of the people who are leaving our division, retiring. And Mr. Henderson, you are certainly, you will be missed. And thank you. And I know that this is like in the middle of a presentation, but I will forget later because I forget all the time. So thank you so much for all of your work. You've taught me so much, and generations of children and teachers agree. So I know I'm not alone, and I'm sure everybody would love the opportunity to say the same thing, but really, thank you.
Mr. Henderson, I have a question about summer school.
Yes, ma'am.
are there particular students that administration has identified to make sure that they are a part of this process so that we capture them? Am I making myself clear?
Yes, ma'am. What we've tried to do is the principals have looked at the students who were engaged or maybe not as much engaged during the time that we went into closing of schools to June 5th. And so we've identified those students and are focusing our time and effort to making sure that those that might not have been engaged, that we get them engaged soon and provide opportunities, learning experiences that will benefit them and prepare them for the upcoming school year. And that's across grades K through 12, each having a different focus, with the high school obviously looking at students who need to recover credit versus at the elementary school students who need additional assistance with early math and reading. So yes, we have spent a lot of time and planning to focus on those number of children.
So a similar question, I guess. I'm hearing that there's a maximum of, at the elementary level, 60 at each school, right? And then, anyway, what about if there are more kids than the 60 who need these services? What will we do then?
Yeah, Ms. Kraft, what we did is that we have a certain amount of funding that we are provided from the Virginia Department of Education, plus what we have in our general fund. In past summer schools, our numbers have been at the elementary 60 students, Walker and Beaufort 90 students, and the high school is based on SOL pass rates, and then students who might want to take courses to reduce their load in their rising year. With that said, we use that particular funding to start, but our elementary principals are well aware that we might get calls from families who maybe are not the ones that are least engaged, but want to stay engaged. And so we will provide those packets for them. And also everything that we have is going to be on our web so they can access it as well. So we've tried to balance what we have in funding, because we had to use some of the money for planning, which we normally would not have done because planning would have taken place daily, face to face. So we've taken that opportunity to take the funds and do what we need to do to get it virtually, but also making sure that we're aware that many families will reach out and we will provide those opportunities for them as well.
I have a couple questions, please.
Yes, Mr. Rossi.
So regarding the kids, say at the high school level and or Beaufort or high school level, who are in need of extra supports throughout the summer. I mean, all the kids that were potentially identified as needing supports to finish credits from the spring, are they placed and not being bumped by kids who might want to get a credit out of the way so that they can clear room for a class next year?
I'll let Eric address that because, yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Any of our students that did not complete their coursework and needed support at the end of the year are automatically enrolled into the summer academy. And once grades are final, the point person for each subject area, say it's biology or chemistry, will re-engage with the students that need some support or that need additional work to re-engage them and make sure they complete those classes over the summer. So that's an automatic process. And that is separate from our traditional summer school offerings, which are, health, PE, and econ personal finance. I don't know if did that answer your question?
I think so. I think I was just looking at it from an equity perspective. I just wanted to make sure that those kids, were placed first. So
yeah, we made sure to place them. Yeah, we made sure to place all of those students, and we will re-engage with every student in those subjects that could not complete their modules or their courses in the spring.
Also, Ms. Torres, in Beaufort School, we know that many kids going from Walker to Beaufort, because school ended earlier, needed additional support for algebra and getting them ready for pre-algebra and algebra. So we have identified those students as well, making sure that they're in better footing as they move into Beaufort. And that's the focus as well at Beaufort. Jesse can add to that if you would like.
Yes, and I would just add to what Ms. Henderson said, that we, it's really almost a separate program for what I had talked about earlier, but we have identified those young people, and they have a teacher, and they will be supported in the instruction that they need in terms of making the connections with the content.
Great, thank you. And then another question, I'm not sure that it falls under this, but as far as students who have IEPs, did we realize any difference in kids that needed extended year or extended school year potentially with the change, with the COVID and the way school ended?
We have addressed that. Ms. Lee, would you like to share our thinking on that?
Mr. Henderson, before Ms. Lee weighs in on that, I do want Ms. Torres to know that we've been in contact. I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Ethan Long, who is the CEO for the Virginia Institute of Autism, talking about how do we restart learning this summer. So they're actively working on a plan now for re-engaging with their students and having multiple models for the students, being it face-to-face, remote learning, or actually having contact in the homes. So, and our other partners, Lafayette, Ivy Creek, Keys Academy, and Elk Hill, staff has been in contact with them also to talk about that re-engagement plan. And I know one of the special ed staff members probably would want to speak to it also.
We also have that's the next item on our list on the agenda, so.
Okay, I just wasn't sure with summer school since the extended school year rolls into summer, but wherever
Well, that's fine. We can talk
be
about
addressed.
that's reasonable. Miss Lee?
Sure, we can address that now. So we, our special education staff and teachers, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the COVID presentation that we're going to do after this, looked at amendments for each student, and each student was considered for ESY. And so we do have some students that will participate in extended school year this summer in ESY. So yes, those considerations were still given, even though we're in the closure and the phase that we're in. There were considerations made, individualized for each student based on their needs and their ability to access.
Thank you.
So I appreciate my oldest is actually, I don't know, part of the Buford program, that the engineering academy thing that they're doing. So it's nice that he actually has something to do every day. So I appreciate that. And just as a mentor, not as a student, not as a student, but I know that parents are really looking for something for their kids to do. So if they can get engaged at this level, that's great. I'm sorry. Is there any other comments from the board? Sometimes I forget. Okay, great. Thanks to all of you for coming out today. And it's okay if we can move on to the next thing on our agenda, which is the virtual social emotional support and special education virtual supports update, because this is very important too.
Right. Dr. King, you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Atkins. Prior to the, once schools closed, we focused on several facets of learning, one being the academic, the other one having to do with physical and fine and performing arts. And the third, and probably the most important, was the social emotional welfare of our students. So tonight we're going to address what we've been doing to help maintain that a social emotional support for our students. And I'm going to turn things over to Patrick Farrell and Joni Murphy.
Hi, good evening. Dr. Atkins, members of the school board. We can go to the next slide, please. As we have known over the last several years, we have devoted a lot of time and attention to trying to establish mental wellness and social emotional learning as a core component of our school program. And looking at our three focus areas, it's actually kind of remarkable how many of these strands have echoed through our conversations tonight about what we've done intentionally to improve adult student social emotional competencies, intentionally building connected communities and creating sustaining safe and equitable school environments. And so we've done so much more work building the infrastructure of that when we're in session. and then to kind of, because of the intense need of the students, even with all of the supports we have in the school building. And then when we take that away, it was really a very major concern, and we want to make sure that we put as much in place as possible. At the same time, knowing that, again, we're working with people to develop the academic content as well. So next slide, please. And so what we really decided to do is, and this, when I'm saying the we, this is mostly the kind of the building administrators, school counselors, school social workers, student support liaisons, school psychologists. Division-wide, we really took an approach of focusing on the 3 C's, making sure, and again, you've heard echoes of it for the presentations of the principals we just heard, connecting, giving students access to coping strategies, and then also continuing to move life forward, that we know that this hopefully is just a blip, that life does go on. And so we want to plan that. We have kids, we had rising kids in 4th grade or throughout all elementaries who didn't get to have that last time in school, and now are worrying about a transition to Walker and didn't get the chance to visit. And so try to really intentionally build as much of those supports in place as possible. So how we've done that, if you can go to the next slide, please. Is so these are basically, we like with mental wellness, like we do with literacy and math and our other domains, we take a tiered approach to it. So here we talked about, let's focus first about the kids and families who have the most intense challenges. And so each school really reached out to about 30 to 50 families, and just knowing that they have had challenges when school's in session, they're asking about basic kind of human needs. Were they paying rent? Did they know about the school lunch program? And then checking in with them, saying, how is everyone doing? Do you need access to community supports? Jody Murphy, who you're going to hear from very shortly, is also been kind of connecting with students and families on her caseload, but she's also provided clinical support for those kids who have the most intended challenges, working with our school counselors or other social workers to try to give them a kind of a wraparound service as best we can. And then luckily, Jody also has access to community grants that had some funds available to help people pay the rent and things like that. So that was a big support for us as well. For specific students with tier 2 and 3 challenges, meaning again, more intensive students, school staff reached out in as many different ways as they possibly could, whether it's a phone, texting, Google meetings, and really just try to connect with them, make the students feel loved, appreciated, and connected to them. And then again, these are we see 20 to 50, that's where the students that were able to reach. They, of course, reached out to many, many more than that. And so, of course, we kind of came to that interesting thing that as the spring went on, some of the students who we never actually got in touch with, we still worried about them, but some of the students who had functioned very well when school was in session were now reaching out to us. And then we really realized that many of the students had depended on the structure and the routines and the great relationships. And a lot of things we've been talking about this evening with school safety are now missing that. And then now they're in crisis when they weren't before. And so for us, we have to be very aware that the dynamic has shifted, that there's a lot of met needs out there that we haven't necessarily anticipated, and we're going to need to be positioned to address, which again has been a lot of our conversation tonight. And the next slide, please. And then and the last piece about kind of the coping and continue to move forward. And what we did for Generally for All Kids, again, the idea is that because even though many students might receive counseling during the school session, using the modalities that we had, we couldn't ensure confidentiality. So we say we're not going to work on individual specific goals, but just again, generally connect kids, try to continue our lessons in social emotional learning. So our school counselors, either through our direct Canvas courses or the Seesaw courses at the elementary level, or just being part of class meetings, we're able to do about 50 to 30 social emotional learning lessons. The CHS counselors, what they're able to do is in reaching out for students at first academically, and then as they kind of start the conversation, we're able to continue and check in with them social emotionally. They were able to reach about 80% of the caseload, which is about 960 students. And luckily, we have a couple of extra supports at the high school. So the clinical psychologist, Cindy Walters, she's able to see weekly 21 kids and send out and continues communication with them. And then and also the wall counselor was able to be in contact with 35 students and families. Now, for an idea about some more specific strategies that we help them with, I'm going to turn over to Jody Murphy, who is our mental wellness facilitator.
Good evening. So we had to get creative, and many of the connections tried to figure out how to do online. And so we used trying to plan regular times to connect. And it says with and without technology, right? So we talked to students and families, and Patrick talked about one of the things was creating equitable and safe community, and also improving adult and student SEL. So it's not just about our students, it's also thinking about our staff. So we wanted to maintain rituals and shared activities if possible. So thinking about having class meetings like we do for kids in school, moving them to online. Lots of classrooms were still having those scheduled class meetings. Also really thinking about, just because we don't see each other every day as we did when we went to school, that people are not out of our minds. We want to make sure that we're connecting, that we're sending notes, that we're making sure the kids know that we're thinking about them and that we're proactive about it. So sending a note through the mail, making a phone call, letting families know that, you know, we are thinking about you right now, what's going on. When I'm talking about being creative, so having to create new traditions. Not everything that we do in the brick and mortar school building translates exactly to the new online world. So we have to create a new normal, thinking about maybe show and tell can work in an elementary school online, but so does introducing your pet. So does letting your family introduce a cultural norm that you might not have been able to bring into the school building. And then this idea of using social media and technology that we haven't really used exactly the way in our school buildings that we've been using. And we want to think about that. Using technology has allowed us to be connected during these 3 months that we've been closed. It's helpful. It's been a helpful way for us to stay connected, but that we have to encourage it in a safe way, that we want to make sure it's not excessive or inappropriate, especially when we're thinking about our elementary school kids, that we have to, you know, monitor it, and that we want to use it to be connected but not compare each other, and that we're using it from safe and credible sources, right? So lots of principals have been doing these amazing YouTube messages, and they're still doing morning announcements, and there's all these awesome ways that we're able to stay connected to each other. Will you go to the next slide, please? And then we want to teach coping strategies, and these are also ways that we've had to get creative. So we want to teach kids how to look out for each other. And traditionally, right, it's the adults who tend to look out for the students. But this is a time where we want to teach everybody to look out for each other. Generally, we work through classroom teachers because they have the closest link to the kids. But as the social workers and the school counselors are more removed, just being over technology, we're needing to even more so rely on our teachers to say, who's not showing up to our classroom meetings in the high school and the middle schools, who haven't you connected with, and who do we need to reach out directly? We also want to, and we have been really supporting our parents so that they can work on their coping strategies to support their kids, because having kids at home all day is hard for those of us who are parenting and working. Okay, you can move to the next slide. So some of the strategies that we've been using are listed here, and things like getting them to talk, which seems really simple, but we have to remember kids right now, many of them, all ages, K-12, really believe that, you know, the stronger you are means that you don't talk about your emotions. And so that's something that we need to work on, because we know that research shows us that if you can talk about your emotions, it just reduces the overall intensity and the longevity of feeling the feelings, the strong feelings that we have. And so we want to be, and we have been specific with kids and our staff about, like, what's worrying you about COVID? What's going on for you? How has the experience changed your daily life? We know that it's changed daily life for all of us. And so giving them that space to talk about it has been a good thing for kids. Being able to sit in the space with kids, so validating how they're feeling, affirming them, being positive, allowing them to say how they're feeling and being okay with it. We want to be the change for students. We want to let them know that we've been thinking about them a lot. We want to tell them what it's been like for us. We want to let them know that it's okay if things feel hard. We want to let them understand that we miss them. We miss the time that we get to spend with them when we are at school. And so it's okay that things feel different. And we want to be thinking about like, hey, I've been wondering if you're worried about, and then fill in the blank. I know when we were together at school all the time, you talked about your grandmother. I know how close you are. Are you worried? And we also want to remember that developmentally, kids are in all different places. So things like when it says let their story be the most important, I'm sure many of you have heard kids are sad, upset. Their baseball season ended. They didn't get to have the typical fourth grade stepping up ceremony. Things that for many adults will be saying like, that's not a big deal. But for kids, they focus on themselves, even in really large scale events that are going on. And that's okay. We can let them do that. That's an okay coping strategy to then help them start to move forward. And we do a lot of that by helping them be empathetic and compassionate towards themselves and each other. Okay, next slide. Sorry. So while we're working on teaching coping strategies, we also want to help students and staff continue to move forward. And one of the ways we can do that is by being direct and address uncertainty. We want to make informed decisions about what kids need to know. And again, all the way from pre-K all the way up to 12, we want them to know what they need to know to feel safe. And that's going to differ by the age, right? So a 12th grader is going to need to know a lot more than a kindergartner. We want to create an environment where kids can ask questions, no matter what the questions may be, and that we can answer them. And sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know what the answer is, but I will find out. We want to let kids know that they're going to be safe, and we're going to take steps to ensure their safety. We want to encourage compassion. And compassion for vulnerable people, right? That's what we've been doing for these 3 months. And we know as we start to return to school, we will need to continue to do that. And there's a part in the addressing uncertainty that we need to think about, that we want to emphasize or talk about, that there are people who get sick. That is a fact of life, because during this pandemic, kids in particular are scared about that. And so being direct and honest about that, many people recover and sometimes people don't, and allowing that conversation to take place and then answering the questions that kids have the very best way you can, and helping parents be able to have those hard, difficult conversations. Meeting basic needs. So ensuring that kids and families' basic needs are met allows for people to be able to move forward. And then tackling unpredictability and setting routines. So it's important to remember that for a lot of people, school, for kids, school is predictable. I get up, I go to school, whether it's on the bus or I walk or somebody drops me off. I know what to expect, and then I go home. When we closed on March 13th, those routines really stopped and changed. And so helping set routines that are possible within the framework of what somebody's home looks like, and helping parents figure out what that can look like within the confines of what works for their home without judgment, and helping and meet every family where they're at. Okay.
So to kind of sum up, again, it's really to acknowledge the fact that this is a disruptive thing in our lives, and that change and intense emotions are to be expected. Really trying to we talk about social distancing, but really want to talk more about social connection. Yeah, we might need to physically distance, but the social connection is critical for both adults and families and students. We know we need to talk about caregivers and staff prioritizing self-care and modify expectations for ourselves. That I think what we saw come springtime is that we kept on telling ourselves as school staff, this is a marathon, not a sprint. But that we found by the beginning of June that we were panting because we felt like we were sprinting. And so we realized that we have to kind of stop. Our first obligation is always to take care of our kids and our families, but we need to take care of ourselves because we need to be able to sustain our efforts. We do know that there are many different resources and strategies available. Like Jody said, some of them might have to be shifted a little bit for this new environment, but we're very lucky to be in a resource-rich community. And then along the same lines, treatment can be a little different, but can still be effective. But we do know that if we front load a lot of this work, and just like a lot of the principals said earlier about maintaining engagement over the summer, it's certainly going to help us transition as best we possibly can to whatever environment waits us in August. And that's it. Are there any questions?
I think we're just, I think it's from my just listening to what you all just said, I'm so grateful that you guys are available as a resource for our students and for our teachers and our staff and parents. It's obviously weighs heavily on all of our minds, the well-being, emotional well-being of our families and students and our staff. I just want to voice how grateful I was especially to our elementary school teacher who was just really able to keep her kids engaged. Even just the minimum connection was just so vital for my little child. But I just really appreciate your leadership, Patrick and Jody, in these fronts, because it's critical. So I'm willing. Any other board members have any comments or questions?
Ms. McKeever, Dr. King, do you have to add anything on your side?
Yes, I was going to let the board finish asking about the first section, but
okay.
But thank you.
Okay, that's the special ed. This is about the social emotional learning. So, any questions about the social emotional learning piece? So that we can. Okay, great, Dr. King.
Yes, Madam Chair. At this time, we'll have Special Education Supervisor Katrina Lee, as well as Special Education Coordinator Rachel Rasnick. They're going to update us on the special education virtual supports.
Much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Atkins. We are very pleased to be able to share some of the supports and exciting things we were able to do amidst the, I would say, adversity. I was always told when you have an adversity, find out what the lesson is in it. And I truly think that, I know that our team really rose and exceeded the expectations with working with our families, our children. And so we're really proud about that. So we're also really proud, all of the images you see are our students. And so this is our response to COVID-19, and it closed our schools, but didn't stop our instruction. And that is because of the wonderful team collective we have across the division. So Rachel Rasnick and I, the special education coordinator, one of them will be presenting to you. Oh, next slide.
I need some ice.
Okay. So preparation. As soon as this started and we got the news that schools would have to close, we, the special education department jumped into action, collaborating with the general education counterparts. And that preparation has continued through the closure. So we'll talk about each phase of that. Okay, next slide. Okay. Immediately when schools closed, we knew that we would have to look at different options for our students with disabilities. Their needs are the same, but also different, having unique needs for accessibility, accommodation, strategies, and how we could meet those needs immediately with the students being at home. And so the team truly got into action immediately and started to look at expectations and what we could do for our students and our families. So our teachers looked at many of these things looking at daily office hours. So immediately we looked at daily office hours and weekly office hours and when we could be available for our students and our parents. Many of our students access visual supports, which Rachel will talk about, and just many other supports that teachers provide, and parents, many are not specialized special education teachers, and we knew that that would be different and challenging. So that was something of high importance, and we wanted to make sure that we were available for our parents and our students, so we could communicate with them and support the parents at home. All while making sure that, we were maintaining compliance and documentation and communication. So those pieces, related services also. How can you look at those things at home? Our related services, occupational therapy, physical therapy. So we looked at all of those things and how we could do those in a virtual environment, how we could support the families in a virtual environment, what resources, what tools, what materials could we give to families who are now having to implement, some of these strategies that we do in a school environment. So that was initially, I will say, a challenge. It turned into a great experience and great relationships and communication with families. And then again, for our work, just making sure we were documenting communications. Every week we were on Google Hangouts and just meeting with our families and meeting with our students. And from a student services lens, we're looking at counseling services for our students. Even though counseling in the school setting is to access school, this pandemic, of course, raised anxiety for our students. So making those services available to our students, letting them know that we were still there for them. We were still there for them, even though they were not in our brick and mortar school buildings. The counselors were still available for them. Our school psychologists were available for them. Our social workers were available to them. And so just making sure those supports were there. And also initially when this first started, making sure that our families who experience homelessness or who may have experienced homelessness as a result of this, many families, having, not working or losing jobs because of businesses closing down, just being very aware of how we could support those families, because that's an area also that we cover. So that was the initial kind of framework. We sat down and figured out how can we look at all of these areas to meet the needs of our students going forward. Okay. Go to the next slide, and Rachel will talk about established continuity plan for closure.
So one of the things that we quickly realized is that we needed an efficient way to communicate with our special education providers. So there are special education teachers who support students ages 2 through 22 in all of our school buildings. And so coordinators led weekly department meetings with those school-based teams that included all special education providers in the building, including many times the social workers and the school psychologists. And we established what we called the continuity plan. And this was a living, breathing guidance document that allowed our teachers to, at any moment, access the guidance, the tutorials, the support documentation, the resources that we had curated without having to sift through their emails, without having to reach out to anybody. And that's something we updated on a daily basis and our teachers accessed on a daily basis. And as you all know, special education has a lot of documentation to ensure that the rights of students with disabilities are respected. And so we consulted with our legal team, and the decision was made to amend each IEP if the IEP team felt that was necessary, and to not do it in a blanket way. So instead of what has happened in other school divisions, which is fine, we did it a little different. We actually held conversations with each of our parents prior to proposing the amendment. So those amendments had parent feedback. And we made sure that the load on teachers, after having made all those phone calls and held all those meetings, we established a different platform to complete the paperwork so that we could respect their time and give them space. And the last piece, we held a lot of virtual meetings. We immediately, when schools closed, moved to virtual meetings. We held meetings on March 18th on Google Hangouts. And that allowed our parents to participate. It allowed our teachers to participate, and it allowed us to stay in compliance and supported our families well, we believe. And if you want to advance. And all that was because we wanted to make sure that our special education students had access to quality instruction. So that came in two ways. One way was that we wanted to make sure they could access what their peers were accessing in their classrooms. And that involved intense collaboration with general education teachers. A lot of our special education teachers said it was the best co-teaching they've ever done. So much more collaboration, so much more time for collaboration. And at the coordinator level, we were able to work with the literacy and math coordinators in the goal of making the materials as accessible as possible at the beginning. So doing less modification and more advanced proactive options. And then we provided specialized instruction as well. So we let teachers know that the expectation would be once new instruction was provided, that they would be expected to start providing some modified special ed interventions. This came in a number of forms. I've got some teachers who would blow your socks off if you saw what they pulled together. But what it allowed was our teachers could focus on supporting students and families in an individualized way. We kept going with reading, social emotional, math, and behavioral interventions throughout the closure. Some as often as was what was in their IEP before, and some reflected in amendments that reduced the quantity and time.
Okay, on the administration and facilitation piece, with the closure, it meant that we had to go into immediate action, making sure that all of the paperwork pieces, I would say the legalities for all of our students to have their needs met, to still have their free and appropriate education, were still in place. There was no lapse in services. There was no lapse in any of our funding to support our students. So initially, we worked with our CSA to make sure that our students who were in alternative schools, that they had the documentation that would be needed to support their continued learning. And so working with our CSA, making sure that from a local CSA, working with our state also CSA to ensure that there was a change. And like we will say, IDEA was not meant for COVID. I don't think the CSA guidelines were built for this also. So collaborating with our state stakeholders to ensure that funding remained in place at the same level for our students was important. We wanted to ensure stability for our students, to make sure that when this COVID closure is over and we're able to return back to quote unquote normal, that if that was still the least restrictive environment for our students, that private placement continued to be stable with the staffing. So we're very pleased with that collaboration, making sure that those things stayed in place. Again, working with our alternative schools, making sure that their plans coincided with our expectations from a division level. Even though they are, the student's private provider, we remain the LEA. And so we work with them closely with our coordinator of alternatives as well, to make sure that their plans were plans that we implement in Charlottesville City Schools with the same level of rigor that we will be providing instruction. We work with our partners in Region 10 and also PrEP, our regional education program, to just ensure from the health and wellness, which Patrick and Jody talked about a lot, and from our regional program, who provides, from parent resources to make sure those things were still going out to parents. The physical therapy and other services that are provided through our regional program, those things continued. Additionally, our Piedmont Regional Education Program, Ivy Creek program, provided thorough weekly updates for all of our students that they were serving and they were working with. And they also collaborated with our teams when we were having meetings in PD. So that partnership remained, and that was very important. So we were able to do things on a high level with other partners. Kudos to everyone who assisted with this. And I know Jeff's on distribution of technology for our families was huge for our families and for our students who have access to assistive technology for communication needs, for their instructional needs. Those things needed to remain in place, and for our families to have accessibility to hotspots, to have the technology that they needed in hand within. Again, I just give our division kudos, as Rachel did, because we did a stellar job. As I talked to some of my counterparts in other divisions, we just really rocked it out. So I'm really proud of our staff in our division, and I brag about that, and I'm happy to brag about that. All of our students had the technology they needed in hand. Throughout the process, working with our legal team to have guidance, and also administratively, just making sure that we collaborated with VDOE on a weekly basis to make sure that all of the updates and changes from a special education perspective, that we had those, kind of fresh off the press, so that we could implement any changes that we needed in our school systems. And with IEPs, making sure that we were able to still have parent signatures and parent participation, especially in this environment. It was very important that we continue to have our relationships maintained with our families and our parents. And so we were able to, with social distancing, not able to have the physical signature, we were able to have a digital platform for families that worked for them. And I would say that we saw a huge increase, as one of the takeaways we'll talk about, a huge increase in parent participation. We're really proud of that as well. Okay, advance to the next slide. Okay, and Rachel will talk about during closure.
So once we moved into new instruction, as I talked about before, our teachers supported students discreetly working towards their IEP goals. We've included some examples at the elementary, secondary, and specialized program level, just so you're aware of how those differ. One of the big things really is that we made sure that the services that students received were comparable, but allowed them to access from a different setting. So we were able to mail or distribute similar but modified visuals for students and parents to use. At the elementary level, some of our students are 2 years old, some of them are 10, and there's a difference between what those kinds of services would be. At the secondary level, if we want to continue, our high school and middle school and upper elementary special education teachers were focused a lot on ensuring that students got the credits that they needed in order to progress through the classes that they were taking. Accommodations were made readily available. We were able to quickly allow our special education case managers to add students to accessible texts through Learning Ally collaboration, and additional social, emotional, and executive functioning supports could be given to help families and students prioritize assignments. If you want to, Leslie, if you want to go to the instruction in specialized programs. I kind of whipped through this stuff, sorry. So we have we're highlighting 4 of our specialized programs here because the students in those programs do have very unique needs. These are our early childhood, our autism, our adaptive curriculum, and our behavioral and emotional support students. And those teachers had the challenging job of adapting classroom materials that were already heavily adapted when we were face-to-face. And so they offered significantly adapted virtual sessions to students. They made sure that students had access to their augmentative and assisted communication devices. And one of the things throughout all of these programs that we were excited about was the opportunity to coach and model some of the things that we as teachers, as special education teachers, do in the classroom to support that homeschool connection and that continued learning around communication. And so that was a great opportunity for our teachers and parents to work together.
Okay. Looking at, support for our teachers. And again, I won't read this entire slide, but I will say that I'm very proud of the team, making sure and supporting our teachers, because this was difficult for them also, right? Many of them didn't become teachers to be online and virtual teachers. So making sure that they were supported was important, and making sure that the paperwork that comes along with being a special educator was supported, and compliance was in place was a huge factor. And also looking at social emotional needs for them, as well as our students, just the check-ins for our students and our families, making sure that they were in a good space, because I think care and concern over or in line with compliance was one of the factors that we stressed throughout the process. We have to have and maintain compliance, but we also have to maintain care and concern for our families who this is not the priority for. So balancing, working with teachers to balance that. And 504s also fall in our special education realm. So working with our 504 chairs and case managers in the schools to make sure that 504 plans were considered. If amendments were needed for 504 plans to support students in any way, those considerations were made as well. And also working with families for timelines. I mean, that's something we continue to have conversation about, not just in Charlottesville, but at the state and federal level also. When students were at home, we couldn't test them, obviously. So working with our stakeholders to extend those timelines so that maintaining social distancing so we could be safe for ourselves and our families as well. Student services, going to the next slide. Our social workers, again, the psychologists, work with and supported our families and our students, and continued with our community partnerships, maintain counseling contact with students and families who are receptive to that. And again, just working with our teams just to make sure that we were okay as a special education department. So making sure the teams, the departments, the well-being, and sharing resources for well-being was also something that the student services lens did. Okay, we can advance. Okay. Administration and facilitation. Charlottesville City Schools, I am very proud to say, I know that Dr. Atkins was on several committees and co-chaired several areas and continues to during this time. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be on some of those committees. I know that Rachel was on the Return to School Committee and some more committees during this time. And we really do appreciate that, because the work that was done on those state level committees transferred over into our practices in the school system. So we appreciate that. And you can see the list of things that we participated in collaboration. And I won't read through those, but those are the things that we were able to do, and really appreciate the division supporting us to participate so that we can advocate on a local level in our school division. Okay. Our mission there, moving forward, every learner, every day, everyone, students, families, teachers, truly trying to have that hyperlens focus on everyone during this time, because it was difficult for everyone. So really trying to make sure that, again, everyone's well-being was considered. Lessons learned. We can do things differently, always, right? what can we do differently? And I'm sure that there are a ton of other things that our teachers could share also. Virtual meetings are accessible to our families. And I would say that our participation, I don't know the percentage, but it's certainly increased for parents, and having the opportunity for parents to say, I can attend a meeting if I'm at home for transportation, just a wide array of reasons. Again, our participation, it increased drastically. So that certainly is a takeaway to reaching our families, to say, let's think outside of the box. Some of our families, for whatever reason, may not be comfortable in our school environment, but we find that building those relationships may make those bonds stronger, where the families are more able to come to the school. So that piece will certainly be something we continue, even after face-to-face instruction happens. Looking at the high yields that we could, the high yields that we got from collaborating with our general education counterparts was, I would say, huge. It's not a big enough word for it, but that was amazing. So often when we're in the school building, the collaboration between special education and general education and just vertically across the division doesn't occur because we are doing different things in different areas. So we will certainly try to continue that as a takeaway. And those are some other takeaways that we've learned and that we'll continue to use, looking at teletherapy and some of those things that we will use in the future. And Charlottesville City Schools has exceptional special education teachers and providers. They are dynamic, flexible, and innovative. And I think, I wanted just to read that bullet because we do. I truly mean that with the core. I know that Rachel does. In our department, with every fiber of our being. Our teachers really did an outstanding job. And they are dynamic and flexible, and we just give them kudos for that. A huge thank you to everyone for the continued partnerships during this time. And if there are any questions, we will be happy to answer them. And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
all.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Dr. Atkins.
I just want to say thank you to this team. It has been pretty impressive, the work that they've gotten done, and the quick transition from face to face, and the specificity to which they approached each of our students and our families. They really have been a model, not only in our school division, but well beyond our school division. And just kudos to you, team, for a job well done. Also, that includes Patrick and Jody Murphy. Thank you so much for a job well done.
Definitely. Thank you. What other questions or comments does the board have for Miss Lee or Dr. Lee? I'm sorry, I don't know. And Miss Resnick. I'll learn.
I was just blown away by this presentation. It's amazing and awesome. And I just want to express my gratitude for the hard work that you guys have been doing. You've been doing so much, and you enabled us to see all the components that go into trying to do things in this new environment. And I'm just blown away. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft.
Ms. Torres?
Thank you. I too just want to echo what Dr. Atkins said. I was really impressed with the specificity and just the outreach to families, and loved hearing the takeaways, and the things that you guys learned under these circumstances that really made those connections with the families. And for so long, like the special education advisory committee, we've been trying to figure out how to get more parent involvement and to reach out to families and to get them involved. And who would have thought it would have taken something like this for you guys to realize that difference? So I look forward to hearing how we can continue to incorporate some of these alternative communication, Google Meetup types of ways to meet. Personally, my daughter graduated and she had an IEP, and the team was wonderful in reaching out to me and to Esther as far as just kind of wrapping things up and making sure that she had what she needed as she transitions into college. And yeah, that virtual signature and just the follow through from her case manager. I mean, and so just personally as a parent, but as a school board too, just want to express my gratitude to the entire team, you know, throughout her journey here through Charlottesville City Schools, and really, you know, thank you. And yeah, it was a great transition, and again, thank you for all of your work on the report.
Thank you. Congratulations to her.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and say I'm really impressed with the way that y'all could, you know, not just this staff, but everyone just can kind of switch to doing everything essentially virtual. I know that some of our students still are receiving some in-person maybe lessons, but I'm just you know, impressed that all of this is going on, and so thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments from the board? Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thank you, Ms. Resnick. Y'all have a great night, and thank you for your continued work. So the next item on our agenda, Mr. Henderson, it is the Title I Federal Consolidated Application.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, this is a information and action item. The consolidated application is very similar to the one we did last year. It's very little change just due to the fact that funding has not increased from last year to this year. And Patrick Farrell, who coordinates our federal grants, will address the highlights of this application. Patrick?
Yeah, so like Mr. Henderson said, there's really not too much different for the funding levels. Right now, the state estimates to remain fairly constant for Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. And so we will find out later this summer whether the economy has made any impact on what they might allocate. But for right now, they told us to plan as if it was the same as last year. So our funding levels are pretty similar. For Title I, we mostly spend it on salaries, professional development, family engagement, and instruction materials. And then Title II is we use it to reduce classroom sizes at 4 of our Title I elementary schools. Title III Part A serves limited English proficient students. Bev Catlin does a great job of that. And Title IV we've used for positive behavior supports and mental wellness. And so all those things should remain very similar to what they were last year.
Do you have any questions?
Anybody have any questions about this?
Ms. McKeever, the superintendent does recommend a vote on this application.
Oh, tonight?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Oh yeah, it does say that. My bad. Okay. Anybody, if no questions, anybody have a motion?
Okay, I will move that we approve this application and fill it in for me, just to make sure. I'm like on Zoom brain right now, so I move that we approve this application.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Green, if you would call the roll for the vote.
Okay. Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Ms. Bryson Morseberger,
Yes.
Dr. Crabb,
Yes.
Ms. McKeever,
Yes.
Ms. Berger,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Wade, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. I don't know. I feel like this might be premature, but that might be Mr. Henderson's last agenda item.
Yeah.
And I'm a
He's
little more
gone.
clumped.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Actually, Mr. Henderson, it
Don't get all
it will
choked
not
up,
be.
Mr. Henderson.
What did you see,
We
Dr. Atkins?
usually have 2 meetings in June because of policy. So, Mr. Henderson, there's just one more.
Yeah, one more.
So anyway, not to
He
get
was
ahead of
getting
myself.
too excited, thinking it was his last one.
Well, I didn't want to, jinx it by saying, but I also wanted to acknowledge it just in case it is. Anyway, there's a lot of people leaving our division and retiring from our division. So I don't mean to single Mr. Henderson out by any stretch. But goodness gracious, he's been so vital to our school board and to our division for so long. So we're just going to really miss him. Anyway, return to school update. We've had a very long agenda thus far. So if anybody needs to go off video and do some push-ups or lunges, feel free to do that. But we're going to move on to Dr. Atkins and return to school update.
Thank you, Ms. McKeever. I'm sure this is a presentation that many of our families and our community have anticipated. So I'll jump right into it. And I know that after this presentation that our families there will be many questions and many details that we will have to bring forth to our community and to our families. This is just the start of that process. On Tuesday, June the 9th, our governor released the phases for reopening schools and also released some of the guidelines that we are to use in developing and selecting the model that we will use for bringing our students back in and restarting our educational process. The State Department of Education also has published a rather lengthy document, about 140-page document called Recover, Redesign,